I'm like, so you never heard dress for the job you want? I mean, I'm just saying the job you want is the homeless? I don't get it. I don't get it.
It's a very different, the younger generation is very different hiring. Not only do they they don't wear what you'd think they'd wear half the time. I've had so many of them just late, or they cancel, and I'm just like, where does this come from? It's very different. So finding people that actually still have what I think is a strong work ethic is harder than it used to be.
Hey, welcome to Storypower TV. I am your host, J. Loren Norris, and I am really glad that you're here today. I'm really glad you're here today. And in a minute, I'll say that in English. What I'd really like you to do, though, is reach down there and hit that like, share, and subscribe button, because there are a lot of other people that love to speak English and tell stories, too, and they want to make fun of me, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. I really am, because I don't live on my ego. You know, what's really, really fascinating is watching people who feel like they have to help everybody else. Correct them. Point them in the right direction. Get them together. You know what I mean? I recently got to watch a bunch of people around someone who's legally blind and pretty much legally deaf. And it was fascinating watching them fawn over this person to correct all the errors and to make sure they were safe and they could get from one place to the other into the bathroom. And when I had a chance to ask them, I said, "Do you go to the bathroom on your own at home?" "Yeah." "You walk across the street on your own?" "Yeah." You get through a day without an assistant?" "Yeah." And it's really fascinating to me. But people have this innate need to be needed. And probably in no more or no less space than watching someone navigate life alone for whatever reason. So when I met my in-studio guest, and we started talking about the ways that she has very wisely navigated this, what could be the overwhelm of loneliness, the cleverness, the craftiness, the wisdom, was pretty compelling. I'm not going to try to say her last name because I tear it up every time. But I will say, Sue, welcome to the studio. I'm glad
Thanks.
you're here. And
Great
say
to
your
be
last
here.
name for me because I can't.
Giordano. And
Giordano.
If you've ever been to Chicago, Giordano's Pizza is a thing. So that's why I know people have been to Chicago, because they always ask me if I've owned Giordano's Pizza.
And see, I'm always afraid that I'm going to mess that up because I don't know Giordano's Pizza, but I know Giordano's chocolates.
Oh.
Ghirardelli chocolates
Ghirardelli, yeah.
Some of the best. The little tiny squares and the 47 flavors. Yeah, it's like Baskin Robbins of chocolate.
All good.
Yeah.
Any sweets.
All good. Yeah, horrible for you, but wonderful.
But wonderful.
Okay, so I asked the same question of all of my guests.
Yes.
Did anybody spill the beans and tell you what that question is?
No.
Nobody
one.
leaked it yet?
Not yet.
So far, so good.
So far,
We're going to
so
finish
good.
8 interviews today, and no one has spilled the beans. That's good.
Yeah.
It's like integrity. It's awesome.
Because you asked him not to.
Okay, so here's the question.
Yes.
Who is Jesus to you?
Lord and Savior. He's everything.
And why should I care?
Because without Jesus, I don't know how you do this life. And so I just feel like Jesus, if I didn't have Jesus in my life, it'd be pretty miserable all the time. With him in my life, I live a life of, as I would say, excellence and abundance and joy and peace. But it's only through him, because I look in this world and it's a lot of darkness.
Yeah. My wife told me one time, I said, "You're going to be glad when I'm gone and I'm done pestering you and all that stuff." And she looked at me and goes, "Life is hard enough with you, but I can't imagine it without you."
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that's pretty much the best gospel message I've heard in a long time. Because life with Jesus can be rough, but I can't imagine it without him.
100%.
Okay, so given what I know about you, I have to ask the question, and I think we've kind of poked around this, but never in any one of our coaching sessions have I asked this question directly, so I'm going to ask it directly
Okay.
now. There's a book called A Woman Needs a Man Like a Fish Needs a Bicycle. Have you ever read that book?
No.
Have you heard that title before?
I've heard that title.
What do you think of when you hear that title?
I think it's sad because it's not about, it's about creating something that's of unity and men and women being together and having a relationship that blesses both people. It's not about needing each other. It's not about women being independent and men being independent and not need. It's about creating something that makes life even more enjoyable and putting two people together that together they're more powerful than they were separate.
Now, have you always been single?
I was briefly married.
Just describe brief.
A year, 2 years, something like that.
That's brief. That's pretty
brief.
brief. Yeah. I've only known a couple that were briefer than that.
Yeah, it's pretty
But
brief.
That's pretty brief.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been a business executive, an entrepreneur, a leader in a lot of different capacities. How hard is that when you're the sole breadwinner and the leader and the definer, and you still have to be a woman that's in touch with emotions and all of those aspects? I mean, you're living in a man's world, literally, especially in corporate America.
100%.
So how hard was that to maintain the power of your leadership skills and the power of your femininity at the same time?
Yeah. The corporate world is hard to keep your identity because they're pulling and vying for many different things, right? They want you to be powerful, they want you to have an ego, they want you to be non-emotional, they want you to be able to do all these things, and sometimes they didn't match with my values. And that's when I had to decide if I could stay in different places, if things would change, and have hard conversations with people. The most important thing to me is to live by my own values and my beliefs. And so being in a workplace that supports that had to be number one for me. And if it couldn't be number one for me, I had to reevaluate if it was the right place for me to be. But I have been able to be in places and be at a high level leadership standpoint in a C-suite and kept my integrity because I wouldn't stay if I couldn't.
And how often did that pushback mean the tension of egos? Because generally speaking, men who are high achievers are also ego-driven.
100%.
And their desire to win often means at all costs.
Yeah. Humility. I had to pick and choose what's really important to me. So there's a lot of things that I may not have agreed to or agreed with. There's a lot of things that they had to win for their egos. If it was of value to me, I may have those conversations. But if it wasn't something that's of value to me, I let it go. Because when you really step back and you think of all the things that people nitpick in work environments, a lot of it isn't long lasting and a lot of it isn't of value. Right. We had this one woman in my last job, she just liked to create conflict. And she would say that, I just like to create conflict. So
like it was some agenda.
It was her own agenda.
Wow.
It gave her power. I wasn't going to feed into that. And so I just did my things to make sure that if she started a conflict or something, I would just be like, we're not going to have this conversation, and set a boundary and end the conversation.
Exit
I just
stage
wouldn't,
left.
yeah, I wouldn't engage in things like that. So there's people like that, and you have to figure out how to navigate them because there wasn't any value in the conflict.
So how did you navigate those, and we did talk about this a little bit in a couple of our sessions, those relationships where someone might feel threatened? I mean, you're an accomplished woman, you're an independent woman, you're a beautiful woman, you've got all the threatening features that an insecure spouse might go, stay away from my husband.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that and continue to build strong relationships?
Yeah, because of my own values and integrities, I never would put myself in a place that anybody would be like concerned about me being with their husband or something like that at work. Like I never was alone with men at work. I think where really my strength and my confidence and my leadership and things like that hurt me from a standpoint of relationships is it's hard to date because I was intimidating to men.
Yeah.
And so I think that probably is some of the reason I'm still single. Because when I started dating people, and they'd be like, you do what, and this or that, or how much do you make, or things like that. It tended to be really hard for some men that feel like they have to be the breadwinner. They have to, they need to be needed, right? We talked about that. And that they didn't feel like that they could be, then it was hard to be with somebody like me that has very well accomplished from a corporate standard.
Right. So when you're looking for that engagement in a relationship, and you've said several times just since we've sat down, those core values are so important. Mm-hmm. How do you begin the search, so to speak? And let me frame that a little bit. I believe your background is HR, is that right?
Yeah, corporate American customer relations.
So one of the things that I coach a lot of entrepreneurs on, especially when they're building their business, is you've got to learn how to diversify. Mm-hmm. You've got to learn how to delegate. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. But being able to diversify your product offering, your service offering, and being able to delegate often means looking for someone who can do something, provide a service or a skill that you can't provide on your own. That also means you should know what that diversification is before you go seeking that person. You don't just find a random person and go, oh, I like you. I like the color of your shoes. You should come work for me, and then realize their skills and your skills are identical, and then that's just going to be a power clash. You're not going to accomplish anything. Mm-hmm. So when I coach somebody like that, I say, let's draw the parameter of what that new business system is going to be. What is that expansion going to look like? What kind of person, what kind of education, what kind of personality profile, what circles of influence are they already in? And then once you define that person, what tends to happen is that reticular activating system kicks in. And somehow you're walking around with those 10 parameters in the top of your mind, and you're like, oh, look, they meet all 9 of them. 9 of the 10, that's a good start. Let's go with that. But it's almost as if they appear out of nowhere. Have you gone through that full process, or have you been stopped at the core values? They're like, there's 20 things that I need. The first 5 are non-negotiable, and I get to 6, and I'm like, well, never mind.
Yeah, from a hiring standpoint for people to work with me, one of the things, because I can find a ton of people that have the skill set.
Right.
That's not the hard part. It is finding the character. They're not going to have the same values and beliefs that I have most of the time from what's most important to me, but do they have similar work values and beliefs? Are they willing to work hard, do good work? Do they have integrity? Or do they have an ego, and do they have pride? So I look for characteristics. The skills, again, are easy to find.
And to train.
And to train up if needed, 100%. I'm looking for people that have similar characteristics, and integrity is one that's very important to me. And so when I interview people, I ask very specific questions to try to get around to who are they underneath their interview, right, and what's their true persona, as much as possible. Again, it's a short period of time, but that's more of what I'm looking for. And can we work together? I don't expect them to be exactly like me, and I don't want them to be exactly like me. And I want them to have the ability to challenge me, but in a way that's respectful,
right,
and not in a way that's arrogant and demanding. And so if I can find people that are strong enough to challenge me in a way that's full of integrity and respect, then I know that we have a good match, because I don't ever want someone just to agree with me. I want them to have the strength to say, how about doing this instead?
What was the shortest job interview you ever had?
When I didn't know somebody would make it, or when I can tell if someone's going to make it or not within 5 minutes.
Wow. Mm-hmm. How many of you just said, you know what, thanks for stopping by?
I never want to be that abrupt about it, but I will cut it short. And I used to do 45 minutes, and I was like, I can tell if someone's going to make within 5 minutes, and I'm not going to stay on 40 more minutes. So then I made them to 30 minutes, so I could easily drop off between 20 and 25, and they wouldn't feel as, I don't want people to walk away from the interview feeling bad.
Feeling scathed.
Yeah, because I want them to, it just isn't a match. It doesn't mean that they won't go excel somewhere else. It's just not a match with me. So I can usually tell within 5 minutes if it's worth somebody that I want to see again. And if I do like them, then I'll just continue to have another interview versus having longer interviews in the first interview.
So what's your key question in the first 5 minutes?
One of the things that there's all the questions that people ask, like, where are you going to be in 5 minutes? I don't ever ask that. I try to get at their personal life. Like, I ask them things like, if I asked your friends or your family, what would they say about you or your weaknesses and your strengths? And then I can tell people, like one person, because I work with clients, I'll ask them, what are the types of clients that you work well with, but what are the types of clients that you don't work well with? And I've had people say, well, I work well with everybody. And I'm like, okay, you're out. We don't work well with everybody.
Yeah.
And so are you just
Thanks
trying
for
to...
your lack of integrity. It's very, very showing.
It's very easy. And I'm just like, you don't work well. I have the personality that can work with everybody. And I'm like, okay, you're not. So like those are kind of things that I'm looking for. When I ask them about, and I don't say weaknesses, I actually say, what are the areas that you can grow in? And when they don't have a clue, they're not going to do well for me.
They got no self-awareness.
They have no self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I'm all about, because I'll tell them, I have growth areas. And if they don't have any growth awareness and no self-awareness, it's not going to work for us very well.
Yeah, I think at that point, that's when John Maxwell says you've reached the lid of your leadership. You're not going any further.
No.
And it's amazing how many people from the corporate world, the Peter principle, right? They reach their highest level of incompetence, and that's kind of where they're stuck.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how many people reach that level, and now they've kind of got the Dunning-Kruger effect. They feel like I've reached the pinnacle because I'm so awesome.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, no, actually, you just kind of petered out right there. That's
where you're going to stay.
as far as you're ever going to go.
Yeah, because they feel like they've arrived.
And for some reason, even lateral moves to them feel like a success. You're like, I left company A as this position. I went to company B at the same position, but with more pay. And you're like, okay, so they were more desperate for somebody who could. I think one of the most challenging books I ever read from a corporate America standpoint was given to me by a guy who was 4 or 5 layers up the rung when I was at a Fortune 50 company. And the book was called It's Your Ship.
Oh, I don't think I've read that one.
The philosophy of the admiral was very clear. He said, look, the biggest problem I see in Navy leadership is that you do something wonderful and I get the credit for it. And most people look at that and go, I'm not sure that's true, but it is. And if you've ever been in corporate America, you know that it's true. But most people live in the negative side of that truth, and they say, what really happens is the boss makes a stupid decision and I get blamed for it. And so his declaration was, when you're on this ship, if you have a new idea, unless it requires significant funding or a change to the lifestyle of the majority of the people on the ship, just do it. And if it's great, you get all the reward. And if it fails, you face all the consequences. And so many people in corporate America can't do that. I remember an exit interview, and on the way out, the CEO said to me, my biggest prediction for you is that you have such a high standard of excellence for yourself, and you put that demand on everybody else. You're going to get into corporate America, and you're going to find nobody else has that standard. But what will happen is you will excel at what you do, and your boss will take credit. And when your boss fails, he'll look at you and say, you can handle it better than I can handle it, so I'm going to put this one on you. Thanks for taking one for the team. It was less than 90 days on the first job, and that thanks for taking one for the team was worth almost $30,000 in sales commission.
Wow.
And I was like, is this guy a prophet? No, he just knows patterns. And I think in corporate world and in dating world, those things are true. I mean, there's patterns to people's behavior. Their speech patterns, their physical patterns. How do they show up? Do you show up with the right attitude? Do you show up in the right clothes? Do you show up at a restaurant in your sweats? And when I watch young people today and they show up at job interviews with their Crocs on, I'm like, so you've never heard dress for the job you want? I mean, I'm just saying the job you want is the homeless? I don't get it. I don't get it.
It's a very different, the younger generation is very different hiring. Not only do they they don't wear what you'd think they'd wear half the time. I've had so many of them just late, or they cancel, and I'm just like, where does this come from? It's very different. So finding people that actually still have what I think is a strong work ethic is harder than it used to be.
Now, according to the Smithsonian Institute, a strong work ethic is white privilege.
Okay.
That was recently declared.
Okay.
Which is absolutely fascinating to me.
Yes, me too.
I can't imagine what that means for our culture for years coming.
Yeah.
But the entitlement
Yeah.
level is already off the charts, and
Yeah.
work ethic is already at the bottom of the charts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's your advice for somebody? And as I watched this mutual friend of ours and the way everybody needed to be needed by them, I remembered our conversation. And I thought, Sue has mastered a delicate balance between allowing people to be needed while meeting the needs that you have in human relationships and human interaction without being desperate or clingy or needy, so to speak. And I thought, there's a great parallel. I would love to maybe have a three-way conversation about that and how singleness has become like the disability side in so many relationships. And I say that knowing my sister is a year and a half older than me. She's never been married. She was common law married, I guess, for a while, but her husband died of, that man died of cancer, so I don't know that they were legally husband and wife. But she was a almost seven-figure earner for a while, worked for several major companies, was in charge of multiple states at a time in the advertising world, and very, very successful. And then had a motorcycle accident and was in a toxic relationship at the time. And so never married, never had kids, always made good money. After the physical injury, life really turned in a negative way for her. And then she stayed to take care of my mom until my mom passed. And so she went from this high level, very desirable, everybody wanted her to work for him, everybody wanted to date her, and then all of a sudden she's at home taking care of mom.
Yeah.
And I can't relate. I don't get it, partly because I'm a man, but partly because I've been married to the same woman for almost 31 years now.
Yeah.
And so I know that I'm blessed, and I know that I have an unusual advantage, so to speak, that I have a woman who tolerates me, because that's a gift all by itself.
Yes.
But to also have someone who walks the journey of life with me, and in her words, it's tough enough with you, I can't imagine doing it without you. What's your advice for somebody who's looking at that place and allowing that singleness, not only to be overwhelming emotionally, but to redefine their identity?
Yeah. For me, there was a time in my life that I had to make a decision, because I was single and I wasn't getting married and I wasn't dating that much to change that I had to accept, if I truly believed that God's plan for me was best and none better, I had to truly believe and embrace being single. I couldn't fight it anymore. I kept fighting it, and I kept allowing it to be my reason of why I was lonely or why this or that. At some point in time, you have to make a change to say, this is best and none better for right now. There may be a time that I get married, but right now I'm single, and how can I use my single to glorify God? So for me, it was all going back to my values and my beliefs. How can I use that I have more time than you do, right? I have, yes, there's a lot of pressure because I have to do everything for myself, and I have to support myself. But I also use that to say, I'm going to hire out things that I don't love doing. I got someone that does my lawn. Like, I had to figure out how I can still manage my life and not do everything. But how was I going to, what part of my life was I making sure that it always was glorifying God, and what was taking away from that? I needed to delegate that and get rid of that. So you have to make a decision that you're in a place of, this is what it is for today, and you're going to make it the best and none better. Continue to dream, continue to ask God for what you want and desire. But today, this is what it is, and today's just as good of a day as yesterday and tomorrow.
And so, emotionally, where have you found, aside from faith, or in addition to faith, or as a part of faith, where have you found those places? When I have a rough day, and sometimes she's just like, are you done whining? Shut up. But when I have those rough days and I just want to cry in my pillow or punch a wall or something, I have that someone to talk me down from the edge.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that?
I have to have friends that I know can do that. And I don't have I have a lot of friends, but I have a very few friends that I call when when I need something like that. And they're different. Different people I use for different things, for my emotions. But a lot of what I do too is journal. I exercise a lot because that's getting it out as well.
Yeah.
but you do have to find your outlets, and what do you need your outlets for? But I need them less and less, because I so rely on Jesus to be that, because that's what he says. He's my husband until I have a husband. The hardest part for me, honestly, being single now, is I want to tell people what God's telling me and what God's and I are talking about, and the excitement I have and the dreams that I have. That's things that I don't have somebody to talk to, because some of my friends don't necessarily believe. My other friends have spouses that they're doing it with, and that's on a daily, weekly basis that God's like downloading things for me, and I'm like, oh, I so want to like share this with someone. That's where the desire to have a spouse still resides greatly, because I think that unity that a husband and wife have is something that to share what God's doing and to do what God's plan is for you together is something that's hard to manage when you're single.
I was talking to somebody recently, can't remember exactly, I think it was a coaching client, said that they were going through that moment. Their spouse had been gone for months, maybe even years, and turned to share a Facebook reel. There's nobody there.
Yeah.
They were like, I just lost it. Because I realized in that moment, they're not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
I can't share it now, and they're never going to be here again. And I thought, that's one of the things that, in my opinion, the digital world has altered in our human relationships. But every time I work with somebody on the stories that they tell in the communication, the presumption of the power of that communication is being able to read the room of the people around you. And so many young people have lost that art form of being able to read the room.
Yeah.
Part of it's because there's always glass between us, and part of it's because that anonymity allows them to proclaim what they know to be untrue, or proclaim something they don't care if it's true or not. They can express their emotions without regard for how it impacts anybody else.
100%.
You don't do that in a room face-to-face with people. You offend someone to that degree. If you said face-to-face to some people what you've said online, your face would have already been rearranged. Your nose would be next to your ear. And I grew up in an era where that's how bullies were dealt with. Today we have to send cops and arrest them, apparently, in the UK. If you just say something that might be offensive, that's a law breaking. But we've lost the ability to communicate that way, and I think that's heartbreaking, because it obviously doesn't glorify God, and it obviously makes sharing the gospel near impossible.
Yeah.
Because we just don't know how to be people.
Yeah.
To human. We don't know how to human. So what's your greatest advice for someone who's in that place where whether it's widowed or recently divorced, or maybe they've been divorced for a long time? My mother was divorced when I was 4, widowed when I was 9, never remarried.
Yeah.
So it was a long journey on our own. And we had several conversations about it. I'm like, just go find a guy. And she's like, but I have to take care of your sister, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. And I'm like, I'm not sure if those are excuses or reasons.
Yeah. I think being widowed is very different, though, because you had it and you lost it. And I've never experienced that. Like having something that was beautiful and God honoring and glorifying, and losing that. And how do you adjust to that? That, I think, is probably harder than being single my entire life, or being divorced for, after a short marriage. I think that it is harder to meet people now. It is harder just to go find a guy. It is harder to go just find a woman for guys that are single, because everything's online. And so you're dating online, and now you've got AI that gets involved too, and so it's not this easy. We go to church and we get to meet somebody.
Right.
Or it's not that you're in a workplace anymore, because we're all virtual in the workplace too.
Right.
The amount of places that you're actually meeting people is less and less. And so the resources that you have to meet people are basically online or your friends. And unfortunately, your friends, you're not the top of their mind to think of like who
Right.
they have for friends
Yeah,
to
who
set
can I
you up
connect you to?
with. Yeah. And so you have these online things. And for people like me, that's a person, relationship person, meeting people online is not awesome.
I can imagine.
And you also, there's a lot of fake profiles out there. There's a lot of people that aren't honest out there. And so then you have this safety issue as well.
Right.
And so I think we have to continue to trust that we've got to keep putting out to our friends. Like I even, being here, I'm like, hey, all of you love the Lord. Do you know any single men? Like, be thinking about who I am. And we have to be bold to ask people that we meet, that we feel that have the same values as we are, to ask them and to help us.
That's an interesting strategy, and obviously 100% valid. I mean, who else would you want to ask besides the people that you know are in the kingdom?
Yes.
The people who've met you, heard your stories,
Yes.
know a little bit about you. You're like, okay, you're a qualified pre-interview for me. So, if you recommend them, that I take that of
Yeah.
high accomplishment.
Yeah. And your husband has friends, divorced friends, widowed friends,
Yeah.
what have you. So
Friends that
the
play
people
golf, ride
out there,
bicycles, and exercise. That's a good start.
100%. 100%. So they're there.
Last question, and this is going to seem like it's coming out of left field, but your core values statement in your establishment of, I mean, just the reality of your being successful in corporate America, like you said, that's intimidating some people. I remember hearing a girl say recently, and I say girl, she's probably late 20s, early 30s. She said, I want a man who's 6'1", he's got to be fit, he's got to have a great job, he's got to have a great personality, he's got to have a great sense of humor. She kind of went down her list. Mm-hmm. And then her last thing was, he's got to make at least twice as much money as I do. Mm. And so the podcast she was on, there were like 8, 9 people in the room, all of them girls except the 2 hosts of the podcast. And he said, well, for quantification's sake, what do you make? She said, about 200. He said, 200,000 a year, $500,000 a year is kind of the goal. She said, no, I make 200,000 a month. And he's like, oh, honey, a 6'1" man that's funny doesn't make that kind of money unless he's a stripper or a comedian. And she laughed out loud. She's like, well, where are all the real men?
Mm.
And
that defines a real man.
His reply to her was, where are all the real ladies? Mm. Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, what is that supposed to mean? He said, there's a limited number of ways that you can legally make $200,000 a month. And one of them requires taking your clothes off in front of a camera. And she said, is that a diss? He said, no, it's not a diss. She said, if he can accept that, and my 5-year-old and my 2-year-old, we can be fine. He said, now if you do find a man over 6 foot who also makes $500,000 a month and is okay with your extra baggage of children, he's already murdered somebody. Because the rarity of that human, mm-hmm. if he's that successful in life, he doesn't want your baggage.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to have it. She's like, well, that's very judgmental. He's like, so is asking for all that stuff. Yeah. So the dating world obviously is very complicated. Mm-hmm. How long does it take before success or failure, careers or lack of careers comes up in a dating?
Pretty quickly. Well, because we use social media so much anyways.
Right.
So when you start dating someone, they've already looked you up on LinkedIn and they already know what you do and how you've been successful.
And your job history.
100%. Because
job titles, positions, how many years?
All out there, 100%.
Right.
100%. So they're looking you up on every single social media platform before they're probably engaging with you, or at least after date 1.
Wow. Is that scary? Or does it give you an advantage?
It doesn't give me an advantage. It probably used to be scary. Now it's just a known thing. And so it's
just a factor.
It's just a factor. Yeah.
So what would be your most powerful statement for those who are watching and thinking, I was about ready to just take whatever guy came along, but now I'm second guessing. Never settle.
I think, and you know this more than I do, marriage is hard. It's not easy, and there's work to it. And when you settle and you marry somebody that isn't the right one for you, or you've settled on something, those things come up and they continue to get bigger and bigger in your marriage. And so when I've been through a divorce, that's probably, I don't ever want to be divorced again. And so I'm not willing to settle because that's the risk, that it's not going to work and you're going to have to go through that again. And I just, to me, although I don't love being single, I'd pick singleness over having to break a marriage again.
Very good.
I have one other thing I wanted to add, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. I was just about to
Okay.
ask you anything
All right.
I should have asked that I didn't.
No, not that you'd asked, but you had made a comment about our mutual friend and how everybody kind of honed around her to help. The difference for me, being single, I think, and how I approached her was I was in the gym and she showed up in the gym and she got on the treadmill and I said, hey, I'm right next to you if you need anything. I didn't say, can I help you get on there? Can I set it for you? There's a difference in being single to know that people need their space, and if they need you, they'll ask, versus people that just have come from a different world that they're like, we've got to swarm her. I know how to let people be independent because I'm independent, but I also know that I want to just say to them, if you need me, I'm here.
Right. It's the offer.
It's the offer. And let them say, yes, I do need your help.
So how hard is that as a single? And let's go back early on, recent after the divorce, still struggling. It's been a couple of years, so at a different stage in your life, in your career, in your desirability for somebody to go, hey, come be the mother of my children. How hard was it then to say, I could use a little help in this?
Hard.
I bet.
I never used to know how to ask for help, and then I never knew how to accept help either. I'd be like, no, I got it.
Even if I beat my cat with this bicycle tire before I
Correct, exactly, before I ask for help. But as I've gotten better at it, I realize, at least I approach it in the way that I would want people to, if you need anything, let me know.
Right.
Instead of swarming, like, I'm going to help you, I'm going to do this. It's like, no, if you need me, I will. And then for me to learn to say, I need help. And I think when I got to a place of really letting loneliness overtake a lot of my life, I had to stop and say, I need help.
Right.
And I've made the friends that I can be like, okay, I need help right now.
And that's probably a good guidebook that people would love to have, especially young singles, recently divorced, and that kind of thing.
I think so.
My daughter went through a divorce after having 2 kids. And I was like, your mom did the same thing. I married a single woman, knowing what I was getting into, because I was raised by one. I had a fairly decent idea what life was going to be like. I didn't have any clue what the end result was going to be, but I had a pretty good clue. She'll tell you now the first 5 years that she was married was temporary insanity. The last 30 years, I guess it's just been certifiable. But the idea of trying to figure out how do I navigate. I mean, we met in church, church visitation, it's a story. But the first encounter to do for her, her mother drove 2.5 hours to her house because the landlord was mad that the grass was taller than these chairs. And her mother shows up with a lawnmower in the bed of the pickup and says, here. And then they both stood there and looked at it like, it's not going to get out of the truck and mow the yard by itself. And neither of them had a clue how to get it started. And so I showed up. I think I'd known her 30 days at that time. And it took me 3.5 hours to mow that yard. And it wasn't that big. It was just that thick and that tall. And I look back on that and I think, if that were my sister, she earns enough, my older sister, she earns enough, she would have charged somebody to do it.
Yeah.
She'd be like, just get it done.
Yeah.
And there'll be lemonade on the back porch when you're finished. That kind of, and that's it. It's not a relationship. It's not the beginning of something beautiful. This is a task that needs to be completed. But how that task became the beginning of a relationship, that's a whole different way of navigating life. And obviously it was just the nature of our personalities that happened.
Yeah.
Is that something you could coach somebody if they were, 30 and single with a couple of kids, or, still trying to figure out what life is going to look like after being widowed or divorced? Is that something you could help them with?
100%, because I've been there. I've gone through it all. So I feel like I've learned a lot, and now I'm leading a life that I've navigated it well, that I can continue to have joy, and I'm not always caught up in the things, and so I'd love to.
Don't get caught up in the drama. So how can people reach out to you
drama.
to do that?
So I have a website, Strive for Joy, so they could reach out there.
Excellent. Sue, I appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks, it's great.
Thanks for the
Thank you.
conversation.
Absolutely.
Have a great day. Listen, if you're asking yourself about this whole single thing, and I know there's a whole lot of ways to be single. Maybe you just haven't found the right one. Maybe you've already got a kid in tow and you're thinking, I don't know if this is going to work or not. Maybe you're baby daddy and you're looking at all the complexities of relationship and how do I earn and what about college and what about life. I remember somebody telling me face to face when I was in my early 20s, about 2 weeks after I met my wife, she said to me, you should go to law school now because you've got the mind for it. Go to law school, get your degree, get a great job, then get married. Never went to law school. Never went back to college. I got married. I'm happily married. Had our 13th grandkid today. And we're ecstatic. But I never made it back to law school. Was that a waste? Was that good? Was that bad? Who knows? Only God knows. But if you're asking questions like that right now, or if you're on the other side of that and you're going, I'm single, but I don't want to be like this the rest of my life, there is plenty of advice out there. But get a mentor. Get a mentor, whether it's on Zoom or it's face-to-face. I recommend face-to-face, that you can ask those tough questions to, who's going to give you honest answers and tell you the truth about you where your awareness is lacking. That's what you need. And if you're still asking the question, God, am I supposed to be single? Am I supposed to be married? Am I supposed to go to school here? Am I supposed to start that career? Am I supposed to join the military? Am I supposed to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos? You don't have to ask God that last question. I'll tell you now. No. You're not supposed to just sit on the couch and eat Cheetos. But if you're asking those other questions, I don't know. But He does. And He promises, if you ask Him, He will answer you. So I dare you to ask Him. I'm J. Loren Norris for Storypower TV, and tell it like it is. Have a blessed day. Okay, so really simple question for you. Are you coming to the Storypower retreat? It's August 4th through the 8th. We're actually paying for your room. We're paying for your food. We're encouraging and inviting you to be a part of the Storypower Academy's 4-day retreat. Now, here's what the retreat is all about. For the last many years, almost 15 years, we've done the Storypower Masterclass. Almost every time we've done it, it's been a 1-day, 6-hour, super intensive, very emotionally charged encounter. And it's been an encounter that basically everybody in the room gets to the front of the room one time. They tell their story, and then I coach them on their story, and then I spend the rest of the 6 hours teaching and training. Now, if you've ever been in an environment like that, you walk out at the end of the day with a whole lot of new information and a whole lot of emotional charge and a whole lot of questions that you don't get time to get answered. So the purpose of the retreat is twofold. The first of which is we want to create more opportunities for everyone who attends to get to the front of the room, to get on stage, to get in front of a camera, to really get the pressure put on them about the story they tell. Why did they choose that story? What part of that story is important? What part of that story should they leave out? Which other stories do they need to include? How do those stories fit together? What do they do to present or promote my company, my business, my product, my book, my sales, my coaching? That's a whole lot of questions. It's really hard to answer all of those questions for each individual in one 6-hour day. So the Storypower Masterclass is being expanded to the Storypower Retreat for the purpose of getting those questions answered for everyone who attends. Secondly, though, what we really want to do is help people understand that story isn't just a script that you make up. Scripts are for actors. And a whole lot of people make up a script, they throw it on their nice little presenter so that they can read it from the screen. Maybe they've even got the fancy little teleprompter where they can actually read it and look right into the lens, and you feel like every word they say is so sincere. And yet it's made up and edited and polished, and maybe even, perhaps even, the story itself was made up by AI. It happens. I know, because I have a coaching client that we've been working through her next phase, and part of that includes a book. And she sent me one of the chapters as I was editing through the stories that we've worked on together. I came across the story and I was like, hey, I don't remember ever hearing the story from you. And she's like, wait, I never told anybody that story. In fact, all the elements of it are good, but it's not a true story for me. I've never lived through that moment. I don't know what that's about. I said, so if I was fascinated by the story and then started asking you questions, you couldn't back up those questions. She's like, no, I don't know anything about the event. I don't know anything about the moment. I don't know anything about those people. See, when we go through the Storypower retreat, we ask questions like, why did you choose that story? And then, is it true? And how did that actual moment bring your emotions to the surface? And what does that mean for let me say it like this. Dr. Phil would say, how does that make you feel? That's a really important question, because how that moment made you feel when you relive the story, not narrate it, but when you relive that story, if you're healed from it, that story brings life to others. If you're not healed from it, retelling that story might re-traumatize you and everybody who hears it. If you found healing and you found hope and you found a solution, you found a better way to live because of the moment you lived through, that's what everybody gets out of it. They hear it and they think, wow, that same thing happened to me. I went through the same thing. How can I find a solution? And you become their solution. And yes, that's what the Storypower Retreat is all about. It's discovering those stories that say, this is not just what I want to do, but this is why. This is who I help and how. And what relevant stories in my life should I tell to let them know that I care about them, that I can help them, that I have a solution that's of value to them? That's what you'll walk away with at the end of the Storypower Retreat. But let me add a bonus, a little icing on the cake. We've got a few little tricks up our sleeve that I'm not going to tell everybody because I don't want everybody to steal my ideas. But we have some technologies and some opportunities. And if I were to spin this camera around, you could see our studio right here in Granbury, Texas. And you just might have access to that if you're a member of this retreat. We're also working on some extra things that I'm not even going to say here. But if you're part of the retreat, you're really going to love them. Still working on them. We'll let you know as they come. But you got to get registered for the retreat. The other thing I want you to really know, this is another icing on the cake, is that the people who come to this retreat who really master the art of story power, not just storytelling, a lot of people can tell stories, but the power of stories, what I call story power, is both sides of that blade. Those people who master that become completely different kinds of people in leadership, in influence, in persuasion, in the marketplace. And in this small group of people, listen, the table that we'll be doing our training at is the dining table in the Iron Horse Inn right here in Granbury, Texas. That table seats 14. Not 22, not 16, 14. After we get to 14, it's standing room only. The inn only has 8 rooms. Each room only sleeps 2 people because it has a king bed. So don't be signing up with somebody that you want to split the cost with if you don't want to sleep in the same bed with them. Maybe a spouse, maybe a bestie, but not just any random stranger. But if you want to be a part of that, you need to send me a private message. I'm not putting a link on here. Because there's only room for 14 people, because there's only 8 rooms in this inn, there's only 2 suites. If you want a suite, you need to sign up. Oh, there's only one left. Sorry, one of those is already booked. There's only 1 suite left. There's only 6 other rooms left. If you want to be a part of this retreat, you need to send me a message. You go, hey, I want to be a part of this retreat. If you need a payment plan, we'll work that out. If you need a discount, we'll find an excuse to find a discount that meets your budget if it's possible. But if you want to be here, I want to make a way for you to be here. If you want to change the stories that you tell in your head and from your mouth, you need to be a part of the Storypower Retreat. If you want to change the influence that you have in people's lives because you can reach out to them with a new story that you've never told before, and you can tell it at a gas pump, you can tell it in the grocery store line, you could build it into a 45-minute keynote, you could write it into a book if you want to master stories like that. If you want to live through a moment that you've never experienced before and walk out on the other side of that brand new moment and go, I have a story to tell and it's going to change lives. That's the skill set I want to teach you. I want to teach you not just how to recount, regurgitate, memorize a story, but I want to teach you how to craft one from scratch, from something you've never experienced before. That's what I want you to walk away with. And I want you to be here at Storypower Retreat. It's right here in Granbury, Texas. All you've got to do is get to Granbury. We're going to pay for your room. We're going to pay for your food. All you've got to do is get to Granbury, Texas, August 4 through 8. If you can do that, you're going to walk away a changed person. I'm pretty confident of that. And you're going to walk away empowered in a way that you've never experienced before in your life. If that's of interest to you, you need to send me a private message and say, where's the link and how do I get signed up? and we'll make that happen. I'm Loren Norris with Storypower Academy and the Storypower Retreat coming up in August 4 through 8. You need to get signed up, and you need to do it now. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Christina Knowles, and I just got done taking Jay Loren's Storypower Masterclass. It was amazing. I took away so much information. One of the things that I really enjoyed being formally trained in media many, many years ago is the call to action. I will use that with every speaking engagement, and I'm so grateful that Loren just spoke truth into his teachings, and he is a true professional. And I know this might sound weird, but I've been taking certifications in different classes over the years, and Loren is not boring. I can't even believe I got here at 9, and then the class went by so fast that I was like, it's time to go already? And I was shocked that it was time to go already. So it's an awesome class. You're going to enjoy it, I promise.